A discovery group would be 4 to 6 people who get together, handle scripture, read it, try to figure out how to put it into practice in their own lives. One of the exciting things about a discovery group is it doesn't take a level of expertise for it to happen. Everyday people can use a list of questions that just prompt them to hear what the passage is saying and to start to think about ways that they could begin to practice it within 48 hours. The Great Commission is so important because it was Jesus' final words in Matthew. It comes late in all of the Gospels and early in Acts of setting the tone for reproducing the work of Jesus into the world. He's raised up the 12. He sends them out, 11 that he graduates, to turn the world upside down. And he gives that commission in calling them to go make disciples, baptize them, teach them to obey everything that he's commanded them to do.
So what does it take to get qualified to lead a discovery group?
The qualifications for leading a discovery group are very simple. Learning the basic questions that provide the format, be prepared with the new passage that will be used that week, a willingness to keep the group centered on that passage and not bringing in other material so that everybody can be on the same footing, and a willingness to hear and to try to obey personally, because as the facilitator, the group is going to want to know, are you doing this as well as asking us to do it?
How do discovery groups grow or multiply?
Once a group gets 2 or 3 weeks in, it's really not wise to incorporate new people who are hearing about and beginning to express interest in the group. The ideal way is to reproduce the group experience by whoever is talking to friends, talking to family, talking to coworkers, and they're expressing an interest with it, to get that member to stay with his first discovery group or her discovery group, and then to be willing to reproduce that process, to replicate that process with this new person and their friendship group, so that you're planting the gospel, the Bible, this handling of Scripture into new groups, and they can be just a few weeks behind the original group in this discovery process.
I'm going to ask you this more personal. You used to be a pastor of a traditional church. Why did you leave that, and why are you doing what you're doing now? And don't feel constrained to be real short here.
When I was first introduced to the discovery process and to disciple-making movement principles, they resonated with me biblically. The heritage that I'm a part of places a high emphasis on just asking and answering the question, is this biblical? It connected with a lot of my biblical studies, a lot of my biblical training, but I really quickly recognized that living it out was going to look quite different than what I had been training people to do, what I had been doing. And so there was sort of this crisis immediately of, wow, that sounds biblical, but man, that's going to be a hard transition. while that's going on, I traveled to Africa 3 years in a row to the same place, a war-torn country that was beginning to start to move out of that, and I was overwhelmed by how, from year to year, their living these principles out, applying them, was being so transformational. And so the possibility of what that could look like here grabbed me. I was also teaching a young adult college age class and sharing some of the principles with the young people, and they were excited about it, and that sort of gave me this opportunity to be not just one coal trying to burn by yourself, but in a group of coals, catching fire, holding fire, helping each other to burn in this. The other place where I began to try to implement it was in a local jail, reaching out to a member who had come and had already gotten in trouble with the law. He was wanting his family to plug in with a church that could bless them. His previous church family had become so disappointed that he was in trouble with the law yet again that they'd sort of withdrawn from him. And he was willing to try to start a group in the pod of the jail where he was incarcerated. And I had somebody who, pun intended, was a captive audience. He was fighting boredom. He wanted to do things that would be spiritually beneficial for him, and he was willing to experiment. And so I had, what I was trying to learn, I had somebody who was willing to jump in the deep end, try to live it out, try to walk it. And so we were able to go on this journey together, even though I wasn't with him very often. 2 45-minute visits a week was what I could get. But that process of being on this journey with someone and seeing how it was blessing him, how he was being able to be a blessing to others, and then a lot of time to dig into Scripture, to explore it, to push back against it and evaluate it, just gave me these incredible opportunities. And quickly I began to see the potential and realize that 20 years of pastoral ministry had produced certain amounts of results that I don't discount at all what God had been doing, but I could see so much more potential. And the stories coming out of this country in Africa were beyond what I could have imagined. It was like I was getting to vicariously live Acts 29. And so the potential, I guess is the best word, that was being experienced long distance, being able to see how it might look here, but also frustrated with the shortcomings. It was like I tried to do both things for as long as I could, but I came to the point where in November, December of 2010, I realized I was going to have to make the change, or I was going to be disobedient to what God's Spirit was calling me to do. And so that was when I started the process of transitioning out of the pastoral position. At that time, I'd been 20 years with the same church, and not wanting to leave them in the lurch. How do you transition? And over the next several months was able to make a transition into full-time with a local organization, Final Command Ministries, and still live here in Murfreesboro. I still serve as one of the elders of that church, so I could help encourage. They didn't see it as an internal problem. It wasn't that I was running away from Stones River. It was their awareness that I was being called to something new, and they've rejoiced in having a part in that with financial help, relational connection. My family's still plugged in here, even when I'm traveling internationally. And so God's just created an opening that I could not have imagined for the transition.
Let's go back. I want to ask you to describe a person of peace. What is a person of peace?
A person of peace will be an individual, man or woman, who has relationships within a community that I don't have a relationship with. And they become the bridge, relational bridge, into that small group, that household, that affinity group, that through my relationship with that person, the gospel is able to travel over that bridge into this community.
If I'm brand new to this whole DMM, what's the best next step?
For a person who's brand new, I would suggest starting to experiment with the discovery group format within one of your own friendship or family groups. Transition an existing Bible discussion, Bible class, Bible small group that you already have for a period of 6 to 8 weeks to a discovery format. Ask the group to go along with you on this exploratory process and just experience it, because you're never going to become comfortable with new processes without just trial and error learning. And so that would be where I would recommend. One of the reasons is, as you learn to do it, you'll find that you're working within your own relationships. And that's the best place to start, not starting with somebody that you don't know who may be a person of peace, but starting where you already have relational capital.
By answering the ever-present heresy question.
Heresy is one of the concerns that many people have for unexperienced new readers of the Bible going off on some wild brain rabbit trail. Voicemail. We'll start back over. Church people are often concerned about the risk of a group becoming heretical, going off after some wild idea. And the reality is, the greatest risk of heresy historically, the only place that heresies come into the church from is from within the church, within, somebody, usually a very knowledgeable, influential, charismatic kind of personality who wants to take a group to himself or herself, and they manufacture these wild theories that carry it. New groups will entertain some odd ideas for a period, but one of the questions that we train people to ask whenever it's obvious that one of the members is taking the group away from what the passage is teaching is just ask, where is that in this passage? And so the parameters of what the scripture reveals are the protections. They're the guardrails to keep you out of the ditch on either side. And if the group will learn, when the group learns to ask and be held by that question, where's that in this passage? If it's not in the passage, then we leave it alone. The passage, the scripture, is what provides the protection against heresy.
Okay. I think that's all my